Okay, so we are recording this effective right now. Let me go back to... Finish letting everybody in. I have a full house today. Okay. Let me get my hands on the form. There it is. All right, so good morning to all. Welcome to our little Zoom talking about the buyer's broker agreement, the exclusive buyer brokers agreement. Today we'll be covering only that one, the exclusive buyer brokers agreement. If you've been to any of our other presentations here at Canvas, you know there's three forms that you could use to begin a relationship with a buyer, right? But the exclusive buyer's agreement, as it says on the name, is the one that gives you the exclusivity, is the one that will give you that relationship solidified between yourself and your buyer. As always, remember, Canvas has always been and will always will be a flexible commission company. Our commissions are not set. Our commissions are always negotiable. And I just want to make that disclosure. And if anybody has any question about that, they can ask it at the end. But we'll get cranking in exactly 1 minute. We give everybody out 1 minute to get in. I'm glad to see so many of you doing this. This is going to be recorded, and we will be putting it on our Google page. Google, Facebook, YouTube page, and you'll be able to download it from there and see it again if you have any other questions. I recommend that you take notes as we go along if you have any questions. All of these forms, this one in particular, but all of the forms are already part of your dot loop. They are already there, so you can see them if you want them, in case you want to read them. I recommend you become comfortable with the wording on it, because going forward, this is the way we have to practice. And I said our minute is up, and we're gonna get cranking. Okay. So effective August 17, any agent working with a buyer in any capacity, any agent working with any buyer in a capacity representing that buyer has to have an engagement agreement, has to have a form of way of working with that buyer, right? So you have to, the buyer needs to understand that the compensation that you are earning, it's not you're not working with them for free, that compensation is being derived from somewhere. And the way that is being derived, hold on. Hold on. Hold on, people. Okay. Now let me go back and, okay. So the way you're going to work with somebody is by representing them. And by representing them means they will understand that they will be engaging with you. You're the exclusive buyer's representative for them. And because of this job that you are doing for them, you are earned a compensation, right? So going forward, beginning August 17, actually, you should start practicing this today. But I have signed already about 100 of these. So there's that many of your colleagues that are already comfortable enough and are sitting with buyers and doing this, because every buyer that is going to be working with somebody going forward will have to have this. So every buyer in the United States of America that's going to go look at homes needs to have some form of representation, right? So in Florida, the forms that were written is the touring agreement, which we'll cover at another day, the showing agreement that we'll cover another day, and the exclusive buyer's agreement. The other two forms sort of help you maybe build a relationship, but at the end, you will need an exclusive buyer's broker's agreement anyway. So that's why we recommend that you become comfortable with the exclusive buyer's broker agreement and begin to work with this one from the beginning, because otherwise you're going to have to, if you start with a touring or showing, you're going to have to eventually make a transition to this one, the exclusive buyer's broker's agreement. Okay, so let's start breaking it down. It's a very simple document. It's a very simple piece of information that you will be collecting and you will be filling out with the client. So who are the parties to the exclusive buyer's agreement? Your buyer, whoever you're working with, whoever is your buyer, whoever is the person that you're working with. If it's a single person, a married couple, a united couple, their names need to be in this agreement. Okay, so if you cannot fit all of their names, you can add an appendix or add it on top of it. You can add a box, a wording box within that loop, but you need their names right there. Okay, then grants, it will be Canvas Real Estate. The next wording in the next sentence here at the bottom will be Canvas Real Estate. So let's say it's Pete Gonzalez is the buyer, and then it's Canvas Real Estate, and then your name. So Ernesto Vega. So your name is not required, but we ask you to add your name. That way we can match agreements with agents later in case there's any issue. So number one is the name of the buyer or the name of the buyers that you're representing. Then Canvas Real Estate right here, and then your name right here. Okay. Number two is the length of the time that you will be working with this person. So I recommend, like I always do, that you have a consultation, buyer's consultation with whatever buyer you're working with. So you have a face-to-face, an introduction, you have a relationship building meeting with these buyers before you run and show properties, because it might be someone that is not ready to buy today. That's why I always advise to have your lender from CMG present in that meeting, or because it's not worth taking the time to go out and show a property. These people are not ready. So the term of the agreement, so when it begins, right, and when it ends. So my recommendation is based on the relationship you have with this buyer after doing a consultation, is to put 60 to 90 days. So that means that for 60 to 90 days, this buyer is bound exactly to you. If you feel that you need more time, that you need 6 months for whatever reason, it's perfectly fine. But my recommended time is 60 to 90 days. So if it begins today on August 2nd, right? August, September, October, November, December, mine will end in February, right? That's 6 months, but you don't want to do that. So you want to do 60, so 60 days. So August, September, October 2nd, it will be my expiration day for us 60 days. If it's 60 days, you have not found a property, there is a way to modify and extend the agreement. Okay. The next one, it's very simple, self-explanatory. You need to put what type of property and what location you are helping this buyers find a property. Now, I get a lot of questions on this every time I do this presentation, because everybody says, well, can I just write Florida in single family home, condo, and townhouse? Yes, you can write in whatever you want to, but remember that this document is an exclusive. So it's just like when you do an exclusive listing agreement. The tighter it is, the easier it will be to enforce in the event that you have to enforce. In the event that the buyer goes around your back and buys a house from somebody else, and you're like, hey, I have a buyer's agreement with this buyer, I'm entitled to that compensation, right? So if that is what the route that you're going to go, if you have an agreement that is very ambiguous, that is very open, right? When you end up either in mediation or arbitration, it's going to look like you were trying to do too much because you may not be an expert in the other locations that you included. So that's why I recommend when you do your buyer's agreement, you understand where your buyers are looking for, what type of property they're looking for, because they're already qualified, right? And you take advantage of that. So if I'm working with a family in West Broward County, I will put Miramar, Pembroke Pines, Davie, and Weston locations. And then if they're looking for single family homes or townhomes, I will add single family homes or townhomes. So try to be as narrow as possible, as tied up as much as possible. If you leave it too open, then we could have problems later in the event that we have to, have an issue. Broker's obligation, this describes to the buyer everything that you will be doing for them, right? You'll be using your professional knowledge and skills. You will assist the consumer find their property. You will cooperate with other brokers. Broker understands that you are trying to find a property for them. So this describes what you were doing. It mentions that you adhere to all of the fair housing practices and act, that you will not discriminate on any way, shape, or form, right? And that, everything that you do as an agent for them. So there it describes your duties to the buyer. Then it describes the buyer's duties to you, right? That they will conduct all negotiations with you, that any other piece of real estate they find on themselves, they will send it back to you, that they will contact you if they find a buy owner, right? That they will cooperate with you. They will introduce you to their lender and closing agent if they have their own, right? That they will meet with you at reasonable times to consult and view properties. I love that one. I love letter C. You will meet with them at reasonable times. So if someone calls you at 3 o'clock in the morning, a buyer you're working with, I don't think that's reasonable time and you're not breaching your contract, right? Very important is they hold you harmless against any losses that they have. So that gives you some protection. So read through this weekend. It's going to be a rainy weekend. So sit down and read it, but it explains what the consumer has to do to you, right? And what you have to do for the consumer. So we move to the second page. This moves along rather quickly. The second page, item 6, is a retainer. If you want to charge something up front to solidify that relationship, or if you want to charge something up front to sort of compensate you for the time that you're going to invest from the beginning, this is where you can do that. Remember, a retainer is non-refundable. A retainer that is paid is non-refundable. Some of your colleagues at Canvas will be collecting the transaction fee up front, the retainer up front, when they are meeting with buyers. It's a business decision they're making just to, sort of ask for something to sort of solidify that relationship. Okay. So the retainer, it's up to you. Otherwise, if it's blank, put a 0 on it and a 0 retainer. Okay. Paragraph 7, and this is the paragraph that you're gonna have to literally memorize because it's the one that you're gonna get the most questions on. Because remember, you're asking the buyer to sign a form that says that they are the ones that are responsible for your compensation. They are the ones that are responsible for paying you. But that has a caveat. So this is where you got to read. So broker's compensation is earned when and during the term of this agreement or any renewal or extension. Got it? So they're going to pay you during this agreement or any renewals or extension. Consumer or any person acting on behalf of the consumer contracts to acquire real property as specified in this agreement, all defaults or any other contract to acquire property. So if you showed a property to a buyer and that buyer buys it under a corporation and that corporation is not part of your agreement, you are the one also that are entitled to that compensation. Okay? So you are protected even if it expires. And if they go around your back and buy it with their brother or their cousin or with a company, you are still entitled to compensation. This compensation is for broker services for consumer. So they are paying you for the work you're doing for them. But this is my favorite sentence in this agreement, and this is what puts a smile on my face. Hold on, because it's still people coming in. I'm going to let those in, but I'm not letting anybody else in after this. Compensation received by broker, if any, from an owner or owner's brokers for services rendered to consumer will reduce any amount owed by consumer per this paragraph. So in condensing that legal mumbo jumbo, it says any monies that you collect, from the buyer, right? From in this transaction, from either a seller or a broker, offsets what they have to pay you. So if you put here 3%, right? You put here 3%, or you put $30,000 or $10,000, whatever monies you collect from a seller or a listing broker offsets the amount they owe you. So when you fill out this one, letter A, so you have two options here. So if you fill it in here, that means that you are not charging them a transaction fee, and you will be the one that pays for that transaction fee. Otherwise, the transaction, you fill it out here, you put 2%, 3%, 4%, and you include the $495 right here. So this will also be used for rentals, but rentals, it's not deemed necessary yet. So we're not working with rentals yet. So once we get to implement it for rentals, you'll be using the same form for rentals. But as of right now, it's only for residential real estate purchases. Commercial transactions and rental transactions, they will give us a date when we have to start using this form. So remember, I recommend going with the second one, 4%, $495, you're golden, you're good to go, okay? We'll keep moving right along. We'll go to paragraph A. This is the protection period. This is for how long after the termination of this contract you are protected. You know, if you take a listing, it's the same thing. Listings have a built-in protection period. It says that if the listing expires and a buyer that you brought in comes back and buys a property, you are entitled to your compensation. This paragraph is exactly the same thing. If you show properties to Pete, Mary, and Joe, and then X amount of days later, after your contract expires, they come back and buy the property without you, you are entitled to your compensation. My recommendation, and Michelle and the entire Title Logic team, all the attorneys, is to put 90 days in here, okay? So you go with 90 days. If you want to add more, if you want to put 120, it's your discretion. Our recommendation is minimum of 90 days protection, okay? That's paragraph A. Paragraph A is, remember, for after the agreement is terminated, how long you want to be protected for those buyers not buying those properties that you showed them. Number 9, paragraph number 9 is conditional termination. So this is where you and the buyer decide to terminate this contract, and you set each other free, and everybody goes on their merry way, okay? So what happens here is that this terminates the agreement, but it does not release the buyer from liability from any property that they have shown you. So this agreement could work in a way as follows. If you're working with a buyer and that you could not secure the compensation, or you couldn't get a relationship, or you just couldn't work, you fill this out. There's another form that you use, and you terminate this. Conditional termination fee, as of today, we at Canvas have not implemented one. We are waiting for the rest of the market to tell us where they're going, what everybody else is going to go. And then at that time, we will sort of follow whatever is the trend. So for right now, put 0. Or if you want to charge something up front, you are more than welcome to charge something up front, right? So if you want to charge a fee, you can charge a fee. It's up to you right now. Our policy today is 0, right? But more than likely within the next 30 days, we will be coming back to you saying, hey, team, we're going to change the conditional termination fee. And if anybody wants to release you, you did work, we did work, we're entitled to X amount. We're just waiting to see, okay? So conditional termination, as of today, our recommendation is 0, but you can collect any fees that you want to. Dispute and resolution is the same thing you have in every listing agreement that you guys fill out. This pretty much says that in the event that we end up having a disagreement, we will first go to mediation and arbitration because it's the most cost-effective way to settle anything instead of going to court. So we will go first to mediation and arbitration. So consumers' initials, your initials, my initials, and we're good to go. 11 is that this contract assigns and survives the heirs in the event that your client passes away. Got it? Broker relationship. This is very important, and make sure at the end I'll show you when we get to the bottom of this page, you got to make sure we're using that form. Although we only have this one loaded in that loop, we are Canvas a transaction brokerage. We represent the transaction. We're not a buyer's agent. We're not a non-representative. We function as a transaction broker. Our job is to make sure that we get the transaction to the closing table. So we operate as transaction broker. Other terms, if there's anything else that is required by the buyer, that it has to be in writing. If it's a buyer that tells you they gotta find a property that they can have a pre-occupancy for it, or anything else that the buyer might request, that will go in there. Now, this entire document can be modified by something called the modification agreement, which I will show, I think on Monday or Tuesday. I'm doing another Zoom covering other forms. Today, I just wanted to cover this one. The modification agreement is a document that refers to this agreement where you therefore can change dates and compensation without voiding the agreement. Okay, I don't know if you follow me. The modification agreement lets you change dates and terms of this agreement without voiding the agreement. So then this is signed, consumer's name written out, consumer's signature, and their information. Team, we highly recommend that you are collecting the driver's license up front, that you fill out all of this information, not just a signature. Collect all of that information up front. So consumer signs, you sign, I will sign on a later date, but you are signing it. So you can have it signed, you can open your phone, fill it out on that loop, and automatically go out and show properties, and you're good to go. Submit it to the office when you submit the contract, and I will sign it also so we can all be in compliance. So remember what I was saying before, when you're using these forms, because there's 3 different ones out there, you want to be using, instead of ABBA, EVA. So remember the group ABBA. I know all of you are big ABBA fans. So instead of ABBA is EVA. So this is the one that we use because we are transaction brokers. Okay. So I'm going to go now take a look at questions, because that covered the going over the form part of this scenario, and we'll go to questions. And oh, good. We have so many questions. Awesome. Let me go to the first question. Okay. So Joel, this is not for listings. This is for buyers. So this question is just for buyers. So for listings, you can still use the same listing agreement that you have right now. And then you can use the form that we covered yesterday with the listing. The new listing agreement should be out by Monday. Beatriz, yes, all forms are in that loop. Every single form has been in that loop for 2 weeks. Michelle, this is the exclusive buyer's agreement that we were covering today. I don't know which one you're referring to, but this is the exclusive buyer's agreement that we're covering today. And Michelle's asking, what if my client wants to change their commission? So that is when the modification agreement comes in. If the client wants to change the compensation, or the compensation changes for any way, shape, or form, you use the modification agreement, and that is the one that sort of amends your exclusive buyer's agreement. And we will stay tuned. There will be an announcement for that presentation sometime next week. Sometime next week, we're going to cover touring agreement, showing agreement, and also we'll be going over that modification agreement. So that's where you modify that. Reina, las formas son para el día 17 de agosto, pero yo recomiendo que la empiecen a usar desde ahora, que no esperen hasta el último minuto, que se empiecen a sentir comfortable con ellas. Alberto, no, para las rentas todavía no, pero es el mismo documento que se va a usar para rentas, pero todavía no. Stacy, these forms are on that loop under, I think it's office forms, but all of these forms are already there in that loop. What is the, Joel, I don't understand what is the email address you reference. I don't think I mentioned any email address. So Stacy, this was recorded. This was going to be put in YouTube and you guys are going to get a link to watch it. Okay, I think these are yesterday's questions. Let me see where today's questions are at. I think I was answering old questions. I don't know how these loaded today. Okay. Okay, so Jasmine is asking what's the reasonable retainer amount? We are, as a company, we're not there. We haven't come up with a number yet. We're waiting to see what it's gonna be, sort of the standard in the industry, and we will go with that one. So at this moment, whatever you feel comfortable with, you can charge. What verbiage should I use should be added when consumer can only pay a certain amount, but not the full 3%, and we desire. So Stacy, Stacy and everybody listening, so any compensation you put in the agreement, you can always bring it down with the modification agreement, but you cannot bring it up. So my suggestion recommendation is you start with 3% or 4% and tell the buyer that in the event that you cannot secure your compensation, you guys can amend this agreement via the modification agreement. So it's not verbiage. No, you cannot add any other verbiage to this. This says, I want to work for you. This is what you're going to pay me. And if we cannot get to that number, then we can modify this agreement with the modification agreement. But no, you cannot add any other wording to this agreement. So yes, Claudia, the exclusive buyer's agreement, Claudia, protects you if they buy anything within your described geographical area. So yes, it protects you not only for what you showed them, for anything during that period. So no, so the question, okay, Stacey's asking if you're doing an open house and a buyer walks in without their agent, no, you cannot work with them because that buyer has an exclusive agreement with another buyer. That buyer is hence married to another buyer. So if you have to go to mediation, Claudia, mediation, if you look at your ICA, that is covering your ICA. As a listing agent, if an unrepresented consumer comes to view a property, can the listing agent have them complete? If you have a listing agent and a buyer comes to see you, they have to have also an exclusive buyer's agreement with you. So you need to have that conversation with them and they need to fill out that form. So yes, you cannot, the only area that is exempt from this is if you're holding an open house, an advertised open house, right? You're holding an open house as an advertised open house and the buyer shows up, then you don't need an exclusive buyer's agreement. But if a buyer calls you to go see your house before you show them the house, you need to have something in writing. Who gets their retainer? The retainer is collected up front, Michelle. Do we have recommend with this? How do we recommend we discuss pre-approvals? How do I have Michelle? I do a bunch of classes on buyers consultations. So if you send me an email, I can send you my buyers consultation model. You can follow that along, and you can, based on that, see how you conduct a buyer's consultation. So that is covered on that. And I've done a couple of classes on this on Weston. I cannot do a buyer's consultation Zoom because it will be, you need multiple people. So what I might do is just go over it with you guys. Vena, you can ask 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can ask whatever You remember, this new change gives you the ability to negotiate. You can negotiate your compensation as much as you want to. No one's stopping you. So take advantage of this change that you didn't have before and try to get charged as much as you can. No, okay. So at the end, it's asking if I'm working with a buyers and I go to and it wants to new construction and commissions fluctuate so much and new construction. Can I put in there whatever? No. Adriana, if you're working with a buyer and you already have your buyer's consultation and they're only focused on new construction, I suggest you start with a higher number. And in the event that that number changes for whatever reason, the developer is not compensating as much as you needed, then you can amend the agreement with your modification agreement. So let's say you are going to take them to see D.R. Horton Homes and you put 7% compensation, and then D.R. Horton that week is not paying 4, is 7, is paying 4, then you can modify your compensation at that moment. And is asking if in 90 days, does this apply if the contract expires too? So yes, so the protection period is if the contract is terminated or if the contract is expired. So that's what I'm saying. Based on your client and the relationship you have with your client, you can determine how many days you're going to put on this. So I do have a translation in Spanish, Amarilis. I think if you're interested on it, send me an email. I can put it in the WhatsApp chat so you guys can get it. Although we translated it to Spanish, you need to have it signed in English. You cannot use the Spanish form. It has to be in English. iPhone 75, I don't know who iPhone 75 is. iPhone 75, when you have a chance, make sure you add your name to your phone. That way, when you attend Zooms, people know who you are. So if you're meeting with clients via Zoom, they know who you are. How about an open house? So open houses that you are hosting and are being advertised are exempt. So open houses that you're hosting and are advertised are exempt. So you can gladly do an open house without a problem, without getting them to sign anything. A reasonable retainer, Yellen, is whatever you feel like charging at this moment. As a company, we have not come up with a number yet. Like I said, we're waiting to see what happens in the industry, and we will come back to you once we make that decision. This is all too new, so we're just gauging where the industry goes. But today, if you want to charge a $5,000 retainer, go for it. Beatriz is asking what happens if I agree with the buyer on 2.5 and the property he finds is 3%. So Beatriz, if you agree with 2.5 and the compensation is more, unfortunately, we cannot change it up. We can only change it down. There's no way around that. So that's why my suggestion is on your buyer's consultation, you discuss the form and how you will work with them going forward. Because you can always modify down, you cannot modify up. What information can be added to other terms, Maria Jose? Depends information on the transaction, things that the buyer might need, requests that the buyer might need. So that's what was included there. Claudia's asking, can additional terms, if the buyer can pay the full compensation, we will take a minimum of? No, the settlement does not accept that. So I'm gonna put a pause here before I keep going on the questions. It should have been effective already in all listings. It's only been effective in some listings. The commission as it stands is disappearing from the MLS. The MLS going forward will only say concession, yes or no. So it will say if the seller is paying a concession. So if you're working with a buyer showing them properties, you already know what compensation is going to be offering those properties. So no, you cannot put a pick and choose. You got to pick a fine number. Yes, the 90-day period and it applies if your contract has expired. Okay, so Stacy is asking what happens if a buyer cannot pay compensation at all? So if buyer cannot pay, okay, so remember, compensation from the sellers, it's not disappearing. So Florida starting this a little too late. California started this 2 months ago. 100% of all listings that have gone into the MLS in California, and the entire state of California, they all have some form of compensation, right? So compensation is not, it's not that on the Monday morning, on Monday the 18th, there's going to be no compensation available. Sellers are still paying compensations. And if you watch my Monday meetings, inventory keeps moving up. So as inventory moves up, sellers get more desperate and compensation gets higher, right? So it's not that compensation is disappearing. You will fill out the agreement based on what you want to charge the buyer, but that compensation could change because if you get to the table and you have to give a $500 credit, then you pull out your modification agreement, give your buyer $500 credit, and you're good to go. So if you're charging the buyer directly, fantastic, but most of you will still be getting paid by the seller. Did everybody understand that? Good. How about the listing shows a bonus? So no, you cannot, you gotta put in compensation what the compensation is. You cannot say you cannot add plus bonus or plus extra commission. So if you're working with a buyer when you have your consultation, you may want to start with a higher number then instead of 4%, 5%. Right? You remember, you can always modify down, you can never modify up. You can always submit your offers asking for 4 or 5%. You don't have to go based only on what the listing agent, it's actually not the listing agent, the seller is offering right now. Amarili, send me the email at evega@canvasre.com and I will send you the Spanish one. Just put in the subject line Spanish form and I will send it back to you. Yes, the protection, Monica, the protection period applies even if the contract is canceled. I don't know what OPE means, Jasmine. So if a buyer approached directly to the listing agent at an open house and haven't signed a buyer's agreement with another agent, will the listing agent represent both? Yes, but the listing agent will have to do a buyer's agreement. So if you're listing, you're doing an open house, Peter and Mary walk in through the door, we want to buy the house, you still need to have a buyer's agreement with Pete and Mary in your listing. Every buyer needs to have a buyer's agreement. Stacy is asking if buyers interest in new construction and 3%. I think you guys, it's pretty much the same question. So you can always ask for more from the beginning. You can always write in the agreement with more from the beginning. Once you meet with that buyer, once you have that consultation, you will know what that buyer's interests are. So you'll be able to fill out the agreement based on that. Marcello, we have an integration directly to Florida Forms on that loop. So forms come in instantly. As a matter of fact, the new listing agreement might be there, but don't use it because it's a draft. It's not a final person. If you're working with investors, Adriana's asking, looking for resales and new pre-construction, is it allowed? You can, no, Adriana, you can have 2 agreements with the same person. You can have 1 agreement that you can modify. So you need to have 1 agreement that you can modify. And Rod is asking during the 90-day protection period, if buyers team, I know it's a lot of you in there, can you make sure you're all muted? Because I'm getting a lot of playback feed. Make sure you look at your phone and you are all muted. During the 90-day protection period, if they buy from anybody else, Anrod, yes, you are entitled to your compensation. And then you will have to file a arbitration through the Association of Realtors, see where you get with that. And then if you don't get anywhere with that, then we will go to mediation and arbitration. Yes, so the main question, Stacy, that's a great question. Can compensation be negotiated from seller compensation? And does this have to be aligned in the agreement or this will be negotiated? So from what I'm hearing, all brokers, including us, are going to be offered. So if you take a listing, Stacy, of 5% and you're offering a 2% to whoever brings you a buyer, the way that that will be structured is you're offering a 2% seller's concession, right? So you will be offering a 2% seller's concession. That seller's concession, by the way that the agreement is written, the exclusive buyer's written agreement, becomes your compensation. Remember, the buyer's agreement said that any money you earn offsets whatever they owe you. So that paragraph is the magic paragraph that says you will be compensated for this fee. So no, you don't need anything else. Daniela, can I have a buyer's compensation plus a listing compensation at the same transaction? So if you're representing both buyer and seller, yes, but remember, you're being compensated from the buyer. I mean, the buyers are going to pay you, not that you're going to use the concession. Jocelyn is asking, how do you make a buyer trust you that you will modify the compensation to lower from the seller? You're going to have to, that's what I'm saying, Jocelyn, you got to work on buyer's agreement. Imagine that you're going to do, instead of a listing presentation, you're going to do a buyer's presentation. You're going to meet with a buyer, explain what you bring to the table, what services, what tools, what you do for them. They're going to get to know you, to trust you, and then you're going to have that conversation with them. If a lot of people, when I do this, ask me, Ernesto, isn't this the same thing as doing a listing presentation? I said, it's exactly the same thing as doing a listing presentation. So you got to ramp up your presentation skills. And if working with buyers, which used to be what you did, it's not what it is anymore, and you want to work with listings, awesome. Once again, please, whoever is not muted, can you please mute yourself? The compensation possibilities, can we have outline for different scenarios or how? Okay. I don't know who's talking because I have a feedback there. Stacy, I don't understand your question. Maybe you want to turn on your camera and ask it. I don't understand how you're asking this. Can it be put an additional term? There's additional compensation, Monica? No, you can only put up front what the compensation is. No, Amarilis, type your question again because I don't know what the question was. There's too many questions by now. Jasmine, listing will no longer show percentage of compensation, correct? No, the MLS already, if you have logged into the MLS this week, you will have seen that a lot of listings already are not showing compensations. They are saying concessions only. It will say yes or no. Yes, you're correct. You will have to talk to the listing agent to find out what the concession or compensation is. Correct. So no, it's not required by the listing agent based on the listing they took. They have always been listing agents that they have not been forthcoming with sharing compensation, but the majority will be. All brokers are working on a solution, including us, to have the compensation or concession on our website. And most brokers will have a link on the MLS that will take you to their website. So if you're looking at a listing of Canvas, you will click on broker remarks and it will take you to the Canvas website. Then you will find that listing and you will see what compensation and concession is being offered. And most brokers are working on that solution. So it's something that everybody's working on together. We are almost there modifying our website. Okay, so Stacy says so if buyer compensation is 3% and consumer can pay only 1%, I still need to have 3% in the agreement because I cannot be higher. Any negotiations with owner or seller that offers compensation or additional concession agreement details the buyer's portion will reduce that amount. Yeah, you don't need an extra wording. So if you're working with a buyer, Stacy, and the buyer's going to pay you, you're showing them $300,000 homes. So he says, Stacy, all I can pay you is 9,000. You get the other 2,000 from the listing agent or from the seller. That's perfectly fine. If ask buyer for 5% commission and seller's agent's paying 3%, do I charge? Yes, you can charge the difference to the buyer, Anrod. You can charge it, or you can modify the agreement and downgrade it, whatever you negotiate at that moment. So, and I think I went through all the questions, unless anybody in the chat wants to ask a question live. Anybody going once, going twice? Good. So team, I know that this feels like a lot of information, but we've been prepping for it, and we will keep doing this information sessions until everybody feels comfortable. The way that I see this, if you're meeting a buyer for the first time, like I said, there's 2 other forms that we're going to cover next week. This week, I just wanted you to work with see the buyer's agreement, because eventually you're going to need the buyer's agreement no matter what. So from what I keep hearing from the 300 plus agents that have already seen this from me is, hey, if I have to begin with a buyer's exclusive, why don't I just start with that? Why am I going to muddy the waters? But there's other 2 forms that I will do next week. I think I'm going to do on Monday that cover this a little, that gives you more flexibility, because they're not exclusive forms. Remember, by not being exclusive means that if they sign an exclusive with somebody else, you lose them. But if I meet a buyer from the beginning, right? I met a buyer from the beginning. When I sit down to do a buyer's consultation, I am going to do what I've been doing in my career for 32 years with sellers, because most of my career I've been working with sellers on listing sites. And my contract, I have always said, dear Mr. I will say what I said to my sellers, dear Mr. Buyer, my job, if you engage me, is to find a house that fits your budget, your terms, assist to make sure you get the loan and the terms and conditions that you need, negotiate everything needed in the inspection and appraisal process, and make sure the title company performs all the due diligence and work. So I'm going to do my job. And part of what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I find a property for you where I find a seller or a listing agent that is going to pay for the compensation that I'm outlining in this agreement. Mr. Buyer, if I don't do my job, this paperwork has a termination where you can fire me and we will both go in our merry ways. So if I'm not doing my job, you can fire me. You can work with somebody else, because my job is to find the property you need and to find a seller or a listing agent that is going to compensate me for the work that I'm going to do. But it's up to you to put that trust in me. Okay? And I don't know if you got that little speech. If you need it again, let me know. I'll send it to you. Claudia, if you send me an email, evega@canvasre.com, I will gladly send you the buyer's consultation. It has been a pleasure to share this 45 minutes with you. Have everybody a great weekend. Stay dry, because apparently it's going to rain all weekend. So it's time to stay home and study for this. On Monday, I'm going to do at noon, I'm going to do the touring agreement, the showing agreement, and the modification agreement. So I welcome to see you all on Monday. Have a fantastic weekend. Like always, evega@canvasre.com. If you have any questions about any of this, evega@canvasre.com, and I'll gladly reply back to you. Stay safe and stay dry.